My name's Michael. My mom passed away due to illness when I was young. So, I was raised solely by my dad. He was a lawyer in a small office in our town. People usually imagine lawyers as wealthy elites. But my dad was nothing like that typical image. To outsiders, he seemed just like an ordinary guy giving legal advice in the neighborhood. Actually, that's pretty much how he worked as a lawyer because our family wasn't wealthy. Because we could never be called wealthy. Still, my father raised me with love, and the uncles and aunts in the neighborhood took good care of me. There were always clients at his little office. Listening to him handling these seemingly trivial consultations while sitting beside him brought me joy. That's why, even though he was a poor lawyer, I still thought he was cool. Many people were saved by my dad, and they often came to express their gratitude. The most frequent visitor was the owner of some Mexican restaurant. I didn't quite understand it as a child, but it seems that my dad saved this owner from a fraud crisis. To show his gratitude, the owner often invited my dad and me to his restaurant. It was located in a prime area, similar to New York's, and apparently, it was a well-known, high-end Mexican place. I don't know why such a person consulted my dad, but we often received his kindness, and I was even invited there alone. You saved my life, so don't hesitate to come to my restaurant anytime. I'll treat you to delicious, he would say to my dad. For me, this restaurant owner was like a second father. There were many people who admired and cared for my dad and me. Seeing all this, I naturally dreamt of becoming a lawyer. However, when I thought about my career path after graduating from high school, I was at a loss. This is because it was difficult for me to come up with an answer as to which of the universities I had been accepted to should go to. I was accepted into 2 universities, a local public university in sociology and a private law school in the city. Of course, to become a lawyer, the law school was the obvious choice. But I struggled to decide due to the cost of tuition. The reason is tuition fees. There is a big difference in tuition fees between national and private schools, and if you go to California, you will have to pay rent. Moreover, I would need to attend graduate school to become a lawyer. Above all, leaving home meant my dad would be all alone. Considering all factors, I ultimately chose to attend the local public university. When I told my dad, he seemed deeply disappointed. He probably wanted me to become a lawyer too. I wanted to fulfill his wish, but I couldn't bear the thought of burdening him financially or leaving him lonely. So, I decided to go to the public university, and at that moment, I gave up on my dream of becoming a lawyer. I spent 4 years in college. My dad often suggested I pursue law, but I always gently refused. I found a job without his influence and successfully received an offer. Luckily, the company was well known, and when I told people I got a job there, most of them congratulated me. So, the dream of becoming a lawyer was completely tucked away in the depths of my heart, and I began working for that company. The company I joined hesitantly turned out to be quite good. It was a famous large corporation, so good work environment and nice colleagues were expected. I thought choosing a regular company was the right decision. My dad kept persuading me to consider law, but I always evaded the topic. But even in such a good company, there was one unpleasant thing. To my surprise, a former middle school classmate was also employed there. Under normal circumstances, it might have been a happy coincidence, but for me, it was quite the opposite. The reason is that I hated that classmate. That classmate's name is Christopher. He had a good-looking face and grew up in a privileged family, standing out during our middle school days. Writing this, it might seem like I was jealous of Christopher, but that's not the case. Christopher was a very unpleasant guy. I was a good student back then. I was among the top students. Christopher's grades were slightly lower than mine, but not bad. However, Christopher always saw me as a rival and constantly picked fights with me. He would compete with me in every exam, throwing tantrums when he lost. In sports, he would do everything to hinder me in games I was good at and taunt me excessively in games he excelled in. He was an annoying guy, so even girls who were initially interested in him lost their affection by summer, and by sophomore year, almost everyone avoided him. I avoided Christopher too, but he persistently bothered me. His annoying behavior lasted all 3 years of middle school, leaving me utterly fed up. I was relieved when we graduated. I never imagined my middle school nemesis, Christopher, would end up at the same company. We were in different departments, so I didn't notice him immediately. But one day, as I walked down the hallway, Christopher approached me. "Hey, isn't that Michael? Long time no see, it's Christopher. Remember me?" he said. "Yay, Christopher. Long time. See you around then," I replied. "Wait a sec. Let's catch up. For old times beer. I thought you'd follow in your dad's footsteps and become a lawyer, but you ended up getting a regular job. What happened? Didn't pass the bar exam." Right from the start, he began with his insults, just like in middle school. "Well, various things happened. Why did you choose this company?" I asked. You know, my dad knows someone in HR here. Got a little help from them. Thanks to that, I got into this big company easily," he boasted. "I see. Well, everyone has their reasons. Anyway, I gotta go. My supervisor's calling me. See you later." "Man, you're still as standoffish as ever. Grow up a bit more. Let's go for lunch sometime," he said. Christopher had a talent for rubbing people the wrong way. I quickly left, not wanting to spend any more time with him. However, since we were on the same floor, I ended up running into Christopher quite often. Each time, he would mock me, which became my only stress at work. But as I said earlier, I had no major complaints about the job or the environment, so I continued to work there as usual. Yet, there was always a nagging feeling in the back of my mind. There was satisfaction and a sense of achievement in my job. But perhaps, I still had regrets about not pursuing a career in law. It cast a small shadow over my heart. Still, I pretended not to notice and focused all my energy on the work in front of me. But then, a significant turning point came in my life. One day, as I was working as usual at the company, my phone rang unexpectedly. It was an unknown number. I went to the entrance to take the call, and it was from a hospital. The news was that my dad had collapsed and was unconscious. I hurriedly informed my company and rushed to the hospital. Upon arriving, I was led to a room where my dad lay in bed. There were tubes and machines with graphs showing something next to his bed. The doctor came in and explained my dad's condition. The exact cause was unclear. It was probably related to blood pressure or brain waves, but he had collapsed suddenly and hadn't regained consciousness. Fortunately, there were no visible abnormalities in his body, but all we could do was wait for him to wake up. That was the vague explanation the doctor gave us. At the time, I thought my dad would get better soon and went back to work, but 2 months passed without his consciousness returning. I visited him many times, but there was no change in his condition. Seeing my dad like this and the office empty without him, I made up my mind. It was a feeling I had suppressed deep in my heart. And then, I quit my job. It was to become a lawyer. To carry on my father's will and to relight the office, I vowed to become a lawyer. Of course, I knew becoming a lawyer wasn't easy. I found out that I had to pass the entrance exam for law school, study intensively for 3 years, and only then would I be eligible to take the bar exam. It was a daunting thought, but my determination didn't waver. I had saved up my earnings, and I managed to access my father's account temporarily to pay for law school. I decided to move, having never been particularly attached to our house. I cleared out all our belongings and rented a rundown one-room apartment in the city. There, I began the second chapter of my life, aiming to become a lawyer. First, I took the law school entrance exam and got in. The days of study there flew by in a whirlwind. I barely remember that time, immersed in civil law, criminal law, and various other legal studies from dawn to dusk. Constantly under the pressure of assignments and thesis work, I pored over the legal codes until they were worn out. Fortunately, no friends tried to distract me with hangouts. That allowed me to devote myself entirely to my studies. Still, I never failed to visit my dad or stop by the Mexican chef's place. My dad was always silent, never responding to my stories. Despite that, I'd ramble on about how hard it was to become a lawyer, how much I respected him for overcoming these challenges. The nurses watched over us with warm eyes. When I visited the Mexican chef, he always treated me to good food. I felt guilty and tried to refuse many times, saying it made it hard for me to visit, but he never listened. "Look, Michael, I got some great burritos today. Have a taste." "I'm fine, really. It feels like I'm taking advantage of you. Just some tea is fine." I'm just here to catch you up on my situation." "What are you talking about, Michael? Just hearing your stories is more valuable than any money. Or are you saying you can't eat the burritos I make?" With that, I couldn't refuse without seeming rude, so I ended up accepting the burritos he offered. Having such a warm place to return to was my greatest comfort during those times. The 3 years at law school flew by. Then came the bar exam. The bar exam, with its notorious difficulty, is well known. In some years, it's said to be tougher than getting into top universities like Harvard. I studied day and night, sacrificing sleep to prepare for it. I holed up in my tiny room, barely touching the TV or phone, just focusing on my books and practice exams. I lost track of days, barely eating, barely resting until the day of the exam. The exam covered constitutional law, civil law, criminal law, and included a multiple-choice test and an essay exam over 4 days on a range of subjects. The complexity of the questions was no joke. If you have to do all of that in 4 days, I can only say that people who think they want to go into the legal profession are insane. However, since I wanted to become a member of such an abnormal world, I took on the 4-day test with all my heart. If you ask how I felt about it, I think I did all right. But I was so focused that I'm not quite sure. After the exam, I spent about a week just sleeping and waking up intermittently. Then came the day of the results. The past 3 months since the exam, I barely felt alive. I reviewed my answers repeatedly, thinking they should be good enough. But there's always the fear of unexpected errors or careless mistakes. If I failed, I'd have to study for another year. During the waiting time, I didn't show up at my dad's or James' place because I would feel so awkward. The results were posted online at 4 p.m. I was pacing nervously in front of my computer from 3:30 p.m., waiting. Finally, 4 p.m. arrived. I frantically searched for my exam number on the results page. There it was. My number was listed among the successful candidates. I couldn't help but punch the air and shout with joy. I was brought back to reality by a complaint from the next room, but I couldn't stop shaking with excitement. That moment marked the end of my journey to become a lawyer in that small one-room apartment. With that momentum, I headed straight to the hospital to tell my dad I passed. Then, I told my father, who was lying in the hospital room, that I had passed the bar exam. Dad, who still had his eyes closed, didn't wake up or give any response even after hearing my report. I thought to myself, life isn't like a drama, but I was happy to have reported my success to him. And jokingly, I said, "I'll come back with my lawyer's badge." As I left the room, it seemed like my dad smiled a little, but maybe it was just the lighting. I thought my life as a lawyer was about to start. However, even after passing the bar exam, I wasn't a lawyer yet. Most people think that if they passed a bar exam, they can immediately become a prosecutor or a lawyer. Honestly, until I started down this path, I also thought that way based on my knowledge of TV dramas. I had to undergo a year of judicial training as a trainee. This training is basically an apprenticeship period before becoming a legal professional. For the first month, there will be an introductory training session. All trainees are gathered at a place called the Judicial Training Institute to study thoroughly. But that's just the beginning. Next, I started field-specific practical training. This part is more about hands-on learning, covering civil trials, criminal trials, prosecution, and defense, each for 2 months. The experiences here were fascinating, including discussions with judges after observing real trials. After observing a real trial, participants were able to directly exchange opinions with the judge about the content of a trial. However, it was really difficult to complete the training reports from each position, and I was busy trying to prepare them while trying to talk to them every day. The last 2 months were an elective practical training course that had the biggest impact on my career path. Under this system, legal trainees complete training in 4 areas and then choose the content according to their own career path, interests. Naturally, I chose the lawyer's path and completed various training programs. After a year of this intense training, I was finally recognized as a full-fledged lawyer. Then, I decided to visit the Mexican chef's place after a long time. He had contacted me several times during the year, asking how I was, urging me to visit, bragging about his new recipes. "My name's Michael. My mom passed away due to illness when I was young. So, I was raised solely by my dad. He was a lawyer in a small office in our town. People usually imagine lawyers as wealthy elites. But my dad was nothing like that typical image. To outsiders, he seemed just like an ordinary guy giving legal advice in the neighborhood. I called ahead and then took a taxi there. The familiar storefront hadn't changed and seemed to welcome me back. When I opened the door, there was the chef, unchanged, in his crisp white apron. "I'm back, Uncle." "Oh, Michael, it's been a while." "Welcome back. I've finally made it, Uncle. I can come here as a customer now. Thanks for everything." "What are you talking about, Michael? Considering what your dad did for me, I'm still far from repaying my debt to him." "Don't say that. I could finally become a lawyer because you've always supported me. Being able to properly pay for the food you made, that means a lot to me now. Man, you're making me tear up. All right, I'll serve you some of the best selections today. Just don't get a heart attack when you see the bill." "Hey, I don't have that much savings yet, so go easy on me, please." "Well, you can pay later." We were having a pleasant conversation when the door opened. And in came, of all people, Christopher, with a beautiful woman by his side. It's funny how you often run into the people you least want to see. I sighed internally but pretended not to notice Christopher, watching the chef make burritos instead. But unfortunately, Christopher noticed me. "Hey, isn't that you, Michael? I didn't expect to see you here." From his tone and loud voice, he seemed pretty drunk. He sat next to me, red-faced and giggling. "Who's this, Christopher?" "Someone you know." The heavily made-up woman with a brash attitude asked him rudely. "Oh, just an old classmate. He used to work at my company, but in a different department." "Used to work? So he changed jobs?" "Yeah, he suddenly quit right after joining. I heard from others he left to become a lawyer." "Kinda weird, huh?" "Oh, so he became a lawyer, I see." It seemed she had no interest in me, an outlier from the path of success. She didn't even bother to greet me, just fixated on her phone. "So, you're a lawyer now. Seems like a waste to throw away your life like that." "I don't think I've wasted my life. I just had things I needed to do." "Like what?" "Like running for president." "Why should I explain that to you? We're not that close, are we?" "What's with that attitude? Who do you think you are, huh?" "I'm just a customer here, same as you. Instead of talking to me, why don't you chat with the lady next to you?" Christopher seemed intent on belittling me, but when he realized I wasn't playing along, he got angry. He must have been pretty drunk because what he did next was shocking. He grabbed the beer can I was drinking from, stood up, and poured it over my head. "What are you acting so high and mighty? Don't you see the difference between us? Hey, peasant, you shouldn't be in a nice place like this. It lowers the quality. This should clean your dirty suit up a bit. Suits you better." He laughed as he said this, and the woman next to him, while saying "stop it," had a sickening smile on her face. The chef was in a panic. "What are you doing?" "Oh, just cleaning up a mess. Hygiene is important in a restaurant, right? You bastard." I calmed down James. "Michael, okay, I understand." "Ah, you're done for." The chef then went back to his work. At first, I was too stunned to understand what had happened. When I realized I had been doused with beer, I was filled with rage, but then I quickly calmed down. Reacting in anger would only bring me down to his level. Realizing how foolish that would be, I calmed the chef and faced Christopher. "What you just did constitutes assault under Criminal Law Article 208. I'll be filing a complaint at the nearest police station, so prepare for criminal proceedings." "Huh? What are you talking about?" "Assault. What's that?" "Let me simplify it for you. You just assaulted me, so I'm going to sue you." "Huh? Assault? I didn't hit you." "Assault isn't just about physical violence." "What do you mean?" "You just poured beer over me, staining my suit. That's assault. You've lost it, haven't you? Suing over some spilled beer? That's ridiculous. On the contrary, it's entirely passable. There are precedents for this kind of case." "Precedents? Court decisions." Like a guy who poured food on a woman during a recruiting event, he was charged with assault. Another guy who splashed sauce on a woman got the same charge. Given these precedents, your actions will likely be viewed as assault. Fortunately, there are plenty of witnesses here. You're bluffing. I forgot to mention, I quit my job to become a lawyer. and I passed the bar exam and am now a lawyer. These cases I mentioned are real and recent. So what? Go ahead and sue me. I'll hire a lawyer and fight back. Christopher, are you aware of your situation? Have you ever read your company's employment rules? What are you talking about? Most private companies consider criminal charges grounds for disciplinary action, but that's only if you're convicted. Let me educate you since you're not well versed in law. It's almost certain I'll press charges and a non-prosecution because there's no lack of evidence. It's a public fact you poured beer on me. The other non-prosecution scenario is a settlement, which won't happen because I won't accept any. No matter how much money you offer, I won't forgive what you've done. So, you're definitely becoming a criminal defendant, and you'll probably lose your job. Realizing the seriousness, Christopher turned pale. The woman, clueless, kept asking him what was going on. Christopher, sobered up, begged me. Michael, you're joking, right? I was just excited to see you after so long. You just got mad because I dirtied your suit. Here, take this money for a new one. As a lawyer, you'll need it. He tried to press his wallet's bills into my hand, but I refused. I didn't need his money or a new suit. I don't need it. I'm not struggling for money or suits. I wore the suit just to show it to the chef. Now, Christopher, wait for the prosecutor's call. Christopher, I'm sorry. Please reconsider. Michael, please. Ignoring Christopher's pleas, I addressed the chef. Sorry for the disturbance, uncle. And for my clothes. I'll come back another time for your dish. It's me who should apologize. Having such customers shows we're still a third-rate place. I'll keep improving, so please come back. Uncle, it's not your fault. It's all his. I glanced at Christopher and decided to leave the restaurant. Christopher, in a panic, had completely forgotten about the woman who came with him and desperately clung to me. I got into a taxi to escape his persistence and told the driver to head to the nearest police station. But as the taxi started moving, with Christopher sitting on the road in the rearview mirror, I changed my mind. Sorry, not the police station. Take me home instead. The driver, puzzled, entered my address and drove off. I wasn't giving up on suing Christopher. It just occurred to me that he must have his own life to live. Taking that away would be easy, but I wasn't so cold-hearted to do it mercilessly. So, I'll think about what to do with Christopher later. For now, I just want to relax at home. Looking back, a lot has happened. I haven't lived long, just about 30 years, but it's been full of dramas. For now, I just want to take it easy. Leaning back in the taxi's soft seat, I looked at the night sky. Skyscrapers stood tall, and among them, the crescent moon shone softly yet powerfully. Tomorrow, I'll visit Dad. I don't have my lawyer's badge yet, but I can finally tell him I've caught up to him. Maybe he'll start giving me advice. With these silly thoughts, I slowly closed my eyes.